Okay, we're going to get started. We want to welcome you if you are online with us. And I know that some people are online. There usually are every week. And boy, if I could get you guys to shift over here, it would help me a lot. There we go. Boy, I tell you what, these are some very, very great Christians, because good Christians are willing to change if they need to, right? All right, thank you all. That will help. And if you want a seat further back, there's a couple of seats right over here that'll get you there. All right. So tonight we are going to cover the second part of what I began to discuss previously, and I ran out of time, and I don't want to leave that hanging. I kind of left it up to you to go look that up, and I just don't want to do that. So I want to tell you what's going on in the world, kind of where we are in the world, and I want you to be aware of what's going on in the nation of Israel and in our country, because there's something that has been going on underneath the radar in our country, and it's now appearing to us that it is there. And what sparked this was a large outbreak in our universities and in our larger towns of anti-Semitism. Now, we could hear that being echoed in the news a little bit. On the progressive news channels, they have started to be somewhat anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian. And I'm pro-Palestinian too, if they are doing what's right. But if they're persecuting an innocent group of people, I can't be pro anybody. So we had a tremendous a bunch of murders in the nation of Israel, but it sparked a significant amount of anti-Semitism, so much so that the president of Harvard University stepped down after 6 months because she was pressured to answer a question whether or not the genocide of a group of people, or the calling for the genocide of a group of people, could be wrong, could be seen as something that should not be going on, and she wouldn't answer it. And so where is the anti-Semitism coming from? And we talked about this last time, and remember that there were 3 major dispersions of the nation of Israel. Remember that? And there were the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and Rome all dispersed the nation of Israel. And we had that great grandstand at the time when Masada happened, and they held out until the end after Rome began to sack Jerusalem and all of that, and they were some valiant warriors and all of that. But man, I'm going to tell you, the nation of Israel has been in battle since day one. And God told the nation of Israel before it was born that he would put enmity between the serpent and her seed. The nation of Israel's seed. The reason the nation of Israel suffers so much persecution and trouble is because of that seed that came from her nation. And that seed is Jesus, okay? And we talked about that, and we looked at a little bit at that before we said that there were two major returns. Actually, there were four major returns referred to in the Old Testament of Israel. God said He would bring the nation back, and He did that. He brought them back. He took them to Assyria, brought them back. He took them to Babylon. He brought them back. He dispersed them from Rome, and in 48, He brought them back again. But what I want to posit to you today is that they are not in the nation to stay, and they were going to be driven out again. And I'm almost 100% positive about that. Now, some people don't really agree with that. They think the nation of Israel is here to stay, but they're not. The source of anti-Semitism is found in the book of Revelation chapter 12. So we want to look at that quickly. Revelation chapter 12. Verse 1. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. So a woman with the sun, the moon, and 12 stars, very similar to the dream that Joseph had when he had his dream and got sent off to slavery. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. Now that happened in the birth of Christ. Satan, through the King Herod, decided that he was going to kill the Christ child, and he was going to attempt to kill him. And so he stood before the woman, and he attempted to eliminate that, okay? In verse 5, she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to His throne. And that's what happened to Jesus. Jesus is going to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And we think in our mind, blessed, holy, gentle Jesus, but He's not coming back as blessed, holy, gentle Jesus. He's coming back as the King of kings and Lord of lords. He has a sharp, two-edged sword out of His mouth, and He is going to strike and smite the nations with that sword. He is coming to rule all nations. And Satan knows it. And as a matter of fact, he is scared about it. So in verse 6, the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And we can talk more about the length of time there later, but there are several figures of this 1,260-day period, okay? Now, on your second sheet, we noted the source of anti-Semitism, okay? And I'm not going to go back through all of the others because I want to finish this today. Jesus noted that Israel would once again be driven out of Jerusalem and Judea, and that at a period of time there would be a trouble such as has not been before nor ever shall be. Jesus prophesied when He was here in the Olivet Discourse, right before He was crucified, that the temple was going to be torn down. There would be not one stone left upon another that would not be thrown down. And if you travel to Israel today, you will find not one stone left upon another. It's just gone. It's a clean piece of pavement, except for this big old eyesore that sits there. Okay? Yeah. That's the product of their desolation. And as I said before, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And Israel made the temple and all that it stood for trash. And God took it away and gave it to another group of people. Now, that's a dangerous thing, but God scattered the nation of Israel in 70 A.D. and spread them throughout the whole earth. And that's what led to them experiencing the Holocaust and the flood back to Israel. Now they have flooded back to Israel. There are over 3 million people there now from all nations, from many of the places where, and there are many wanting to go back now. And I'm going to tell you, they're headed into trouble. They still want to go, and they should. That's okay. That's their nation, and it's their land, and we know that. But the reason that Israel has been in trouble, is in trouble now, is because of Satan. Our nation must not become anti-Semitic, because if we do, we are fighting against the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, I want to tell you, I'm going to tell you what Jesus said. He said that our nation, along with all the other nations, will turn against Israel. He said it right there in the Bible. Now, we can tell our nation we don't want to do that. We can tell our nation that we don't want our politicians to do that. But eventually it is going to happen. And I want you to, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we are approaching the end of the age very rapidly. And the nation of Israel is a signpost. What's happening to the nation of Israel is a sign. It's a symbol. It tells us, it's a timepiece that tells us how late it is. And their return in 1948 back into the land, and then this current trouble that they're experiencing right now tells us something about what time it is. Okay? So we're going to look at the bottom of this sheet, second sheet. Daniel chapter 12, verses 1 and 7. Daniel chapter 12 and verses 1 and 7. Speaking of the time of the end, and we know that because it says there later in this chapter, it will be the time of the end. But verse 1 says, at that time, the time of the end, Michael, who is the angel that stands for Israel, shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time, and at that time your people shall be delivered. Why would they need to be delivered? Everyone who is found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And then he goes on to tell about the rest of that. And then in verse 7 he says, then I heard a man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, I want to emphasize those words, completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Who are the holy people? Who are they? Do what? The Jewish people. Who else are they? Yes. The church. When the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, these things will be finished. All right. Joel chapter 3. Joel chapter 3. Just a few books over there to your right. Joel chapter 3. speaking of the end of time, the end of the age, verse 1, for behold, in those days, at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage, who? Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. They have cast lots for my people, have given a boy as a payment for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they may drink. Now, here's what's happening. At the end of time, God is going to allow the nation of Israel to be scattered again across the nations. The earth is going to swallow up the nation again and receive the nation into itself, and God is going to hide them from this situation. But some of them are going to be killed. Some of them are going to be put in prison. Some of them are just going to be exiled to other places. But he says here that he will gather all nations against Jerusalem. And he will, in the valley of Jehoshaphat, and he will enter into judgment there. Now, verses 12 through 16 of this chapter, look at it. The Lord also will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth will shake, but the Lord will be a shelter for his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in the... Let me see if I'm right. I went on from that. Now let's go back up to 12. I'm sorry. Let the nations be awakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, go down, for the winepress is full, and the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon will grow dark, and the stars will diminish their brightness. You ever heard those terminologies? Mm-hmm. The Lord also will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth will shake, but the Lord shall be a shelter for his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So here God continues to say, there's a time coming when I'm going to gather the children of Israel back into the nation. They're going to be embattled. They're going to be embroiled, and the nations are going to come against them, and I'm going to bring them there on this purpose to judge them. And so God is in the process of gathering that or culminating that, and he's allowing this to take place even right now as we watch the news. We can turn on the news, and man, things are getting kind of hot and heavy over there. Now, the damage that Israel has done to Gaza is very extensive. And there are nations in the world right now, a large number of nations in this world, are going to ignore what Hamas did, and they're going to attempt to stop this. Now, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want our nation to be a part of that. But it could culminate in something that we are reading. Zechariah chapter 12. Zechariah chapter 12. The burden of the word of the Lord against Israel. Thus says the Lord, who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundations of the earth, and forms the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. So God tells the nation of Israel here in Zechariah that there's a time coming, and he's going to make Jerusalem heavy. Well, it's getting heavier by the day. I'm going to just tell you right now, the nation of Israel is getting heavy. And it's getting heavy because Satan is angry, the world is angry. What's driving professors in our universities is satanic. It is not just intellectualism. There is nothing righteous about it. It's just pure the spirit of Satan in intellectual people who don't believe in God and don't believe in the Old Testament and don't believe in the New Testament, and they're just following the dictates of Satan's influence upon them. And that president of Harvard University was just one of hundreds, maybe thousands of professors and department heads that are pro-Palestinian and absolutely want from the river of the sea to be rid of Israel. And they can't tell you, even though they're intellectual, they can't tell you that from the river to the sea is a call for genocide. Why can't they tell you that? I'll tell you why. They're under the influence of Satan. Anti-Semitism in our news, in our White House, in the houses of the Senate and the representatives, and in any other hall that influences our nation has got to be purged unless we're going to go down with the rest of the world and be judged in the valley of Jehoshaphat for our wickedness. Now, you know, Christians, Jesus is going to be a shelter for his people. Amen. That's what the rapture's all about. That's right. That's what Jesus' return is all about. It's about a rescue. Jesus is coming to rescue us. But remember, he's only going to rescue us when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. Are you ready? Just say no. Matthew chapter 24. Oh, no, 14. Chapter 14 of Zechariah. 14:1 and following. And I didn't give you the ending of that, but we'll read here till it feels right. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, and your spoil will be divided in your midst. And I will gather all nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord at that time will go forth and fight against the nations as he fights in the day of battle, and in that day his feet will stand where? The Mount of Olives, the very place that he prophesied these things to us. And you know why he prophesied these things to us? Because he knew those were going to happen, and because he knew the Old Testament, and he knew the book of Zechariah. People don't want to read the Bible, but listen, this is full of stuff we need to know. We need to know what's going to happen. So here he says, the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. The Lord will go forth and fight. Verse 4, and that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. I stood on that mountain, and it does face Jerusalem on the east. And it says, the mountain of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of toward the south. You shall flee through my mountain valley, for the mountain valley shall reach to Azel. Yes, you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Thus the Lord my God will come, and all the saints with you. And it shall come to pass in that day that there will be no light, that the lights will diminish. And it shall be one day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but at evening it shall happen that it will be light. Now, something's going to happen in the evening, wouldn't you say? So maybe we could say that we don't know that day that Christ is coming, but we do know the time of the day that he's coming. It says it right there. A brilliant light in evening. All right. Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24. And I'm going to I'm hurrying. Guys, you got to listen fast. All right? You got to go back and look at this too later. All right? Verses 15 through 22. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet in chapter 12, you can go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 12, and find the abomination of desolation of the Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. Whoever reads, let him understand. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. And let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back and get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. For then, at that time, there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until that time, no nor ever shall be. Did you just read that in the book of Daniel? You did, didn't you? All right. That is the time of trouble. That is the great tribulation, and that's what's going to happen. But in the great tribulation, Israel is going to be scattered again. They're going to flee. They're going to move away. They're going to be taken captive and held captive, and it's going to happen. They are not in that nation to stay. And I'd love for them to stay, because that means Jesus has already returned. But they can't be in that land until Jesus returns. So here Jesus says this is what's going to happen. And he says it's going to happen suddenly, all of a sudden. It's going to come down on you, and you're going to have great tribulation. And he said, unless those days were shortened. What days? The days of the tribulation. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Aren't you glad? I bet Israel will be glad about that. We got to have it stop before it destroys us all. Okay, Luke chapter 20. Luke chapter 20. Verse 20. Let me see here. Luke 20. That's not correct, is it? It's 21. Luke 21, verse 20. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, now he's talking here about the coming, his second coming. And in verse 10, if you look at verse 10, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes in various places. But all these things will before all these things, they will lay their hands on you, and so on and so forth. He's talking about the days of the tribulation, correct? All right. But then he says, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you know that its desolation is near. What desolation? The desolation that's going to come upon them during the tribulation. Then let those who are in Judea, where is Judea? Southern Israel. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her. So they'll be sent out of the country, and they'll be prevented from entering the country. Now, can you see the nations of of the world doing that right now? You can see that the writing is on the wall for this. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days, for there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Did Jesus really say that? He did, didn't he? Wrath upon what people? Who? Israel. When the power of the holy people is completely shattered, all these things will be finished. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That is not a dispensational statement. That is a statement about the second coming of Christ and the Great Tribulation. Very clear about that. That is not a dispensational statement. He is never talking about a dispensational church age. He is talking about the Great Tribulation and the second coming. He didn't change subjects. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. Now, here's what... did we go? Oh, yeah. There we go. Keep going. And there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and on the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. So when we see those things starting to culminate and happen in the world, he said, you get ready, because it's fixing to happen. And you and I are experiencing the privilege of watching it happen before our eyes, even though it's going to be grave, even though it's going to be difficult, even though it's going to be shattering to the people and the power of Christians and Jews. Friend, it means Jesus is coming back soon. And we got to welcome that. Amen. Now, this is what's going to happen, and it's told in the book of Revelation. I'm going to sneak it by here, all right? Chapter 12, Revelation, where we were just now. Chapter 12, verse 13. Now, when the dragon saw he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. Who is that? Israel. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for times, and half a time from the presence of the serpent. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman. Who is the woman? Israel, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood, and the earth helped the woman. Who is that? Israel. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman. He couldn't catch her, couldn't get her. God opened the earth up and swallowed them up, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Who has the testimony of Jesus Christ? The church. Who is the offspring of Israel? Who? The church. We are offspring of Israel. And so he was mad. Now, we saw that he had 7 heads and 10 horns. Look at verse 1 of chapter 13. Then I stood on the sand of the sea. I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Who is that? Yes. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him power and his throne and great authority, and I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast and worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him? He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue how long? 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with who? The saints. That's you and me. We are the saints. There's only one way to become a saint. is to kneel at the foot of the cross. It's to receive the gift of the sacrifice, the blood sacrifice that God gave in behalf of sin. You cannot be a saint any other way. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. And if you do not accept the shed blood of Jesus, you cannot be saved. And authority was given to him over every tribe and tongue and nation, and those who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. Who's going to lead into captivity? Who? Who is going to lead the saints and the Jews into captivity? Into captivity on earth. Who? Satan. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. And here is the patience and faith of who? The saints. Now, I want to tell you that anti-Semitism is driven by the powers of hell. And Jesus said, you will be hated by all nations for what? My name's sake. The reason they hate the Jews is because they hate Jesus. But there's a day coming, and we're watching it happen right before our eyes. And if this continues to go like it's going right now in the nation of Israel, the nations are going to move to stop it. And they're going to take Israel out of there. And he said, when those things begin to take place, what did he say to do? Look up. For what? Yes, Jesus is coming back. Now, when his feet touch the Mount of Olives, it's over with. It's over with. And he's going to let us flee to his feet. And he's going to smite the nations. That is what's going to happen. And that's why you're watching what you're watching on TV today. If you watch the news. Somebody said, I don't watch the news anymore. Friend, watch the news, please. But have a Bible in your hand when you watch it, lest you be swayed by the anti-Semitism that is sweeping through the world. Okay? All right, that's the end of our discussion there. And if you have any questions, you can ask me later. I'll write them down, and next time I talk, maybe we'll talk about that. All right, but that's it. I'm sorry I went over 12 minutes, 13 minutes, but we situated our time on purpose so that we had